So there we are. So welcome to the workshop about stress and anxiety. And I think it's a time when we all would do with a little bit more tools for coping with all of this change and uncertainty and just different world that we suddenly found ourselves in. So before we start, those are kind of main key points that we're going to cover. So we'll really look at what is stress and anxiety and what is the difference. Also looking at, can stress and anxiety, can it be good? And again, what makes the difference? And then as we have a little bit more information about that, we'll be able to learn some more practical tools in shifting from that negative to more positive, more motivating and inspiring place to be, and cope with that stress and uncertainty in a way that doesn't affect our health and well-being to that extent. And that is for the short term, but also what we can do in a long run, what we can do in preparation for future stresses, for future uncertainties, and what can we do to build that resilience over long term. And we are. Now, a little bit about me. I have been working as a mental health coach for probably more than 10 years now, specializing really in so-called affective disorders, so stress, anxiety, depression, and very often we have those mental health issues because there is something there from the past, and so it's very often I end up dealing with trauma and how we take learnings from our experiences. And as you know, trauma doesn't just happen cognitively. It's not something we can think about it. Sometimes it's not processed rationally and logically. It's something that lives in our body, something that manifests physically. It becomes that somatic intelligence in our body, guiding our actions, our responses, our feelings, our sense of safety. What do we perceive as safe and as dangerous? So there's quite a lot of work in that, which again gives a lot of insights into how our body creates stress and anxiety, and what does it take to calm it down. And I'm also working as organizational development and organizational well-being consultant. So I've been working with businesses to help them support those, to build those support systems in the companies. So we create right environment for our employees. How do we make sure that our businesses, our working environments, and the way we drive our profits, the way we drive our business performance doesn't actually come at the cost of mental health of those individuals who are delivering those targets. So I'm not going to be going into this story too much. You're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn if you are not already, so you can see more content, insights, and a little bit more background information about me. You're welcome as well to visit my my website and get in touch with me if you have any more questions. So I'm not going to be spending more time talking about me. I'd rather have the session all about you and the value that we can add during this time spent together. So to start with, well, what is stress and anxiety? And when I ask this question at the start of the workshops, what is our understanding and description of stress and anxiety? People are giving me two things. They're either telling me all of the things that influence and causes stress. So they'll be telling me all the too much pressure at work and lack of support from your boss, and maybe something's happening in your relationship, and so on, so on, so on. So they're either giving all those things that can cause stress and anxiety, or they then give the effects of it. So they say, oh, then you feel sick, then it makes you feel nervous, it's you can't think clear, you are tired, you're not sleeping properly, you're not eating properly. So to me, it becomes very clear that just overall, as human beings living in this modern environment, who are experiencing stress and anxiety pretty much every day to a certain level in one way or the other, we don't even understand what it is. We go through school, we go through life, and we don't understand ourselves. We don't understand what makes us human. We don't understand what makes us tick. So everything that I do, and all of my workshops and my one-to-one coaching and work with organizations and even leadership development, is based on this approach that we should first aim to understand ourselves. When we learn what drives us, when we learn a lot of this subconscious evolutionary baggage that we carry, only then we can change our world. Only then we can influence other people. We can achieve performance. We can keep calm, or whatever that is that we want to do. And I think that's the biggest limitation, really, that stops us from having that healthy life, is the fact that there's such a big gap between our current social environment that we are living in and the evolutionary heritage that made us who we are. Because we have evolved for millions of years to be in a completely different world, in a completely different environment. And now suddenly we are in this modern world and we think differently, we behave differently, but evolution doesn't catch up so quickly. Evolution will not catch up in a couple of decades. It takes millions of years to evolve these mechanisms of protection, of cognition, the way our mind and body works. So by understanding that, by understanding what really drives us, then we can become much more effective. Really, we can become much more productive and achieve the results in a way that doesn't sacrifice our mental health. So from that point of view, what is stress and what is anxiety? So stress really is just body's natural fight or flight mechanism that has evolved to protect you. It's there for your protection. What is the difference between stress and anxiety? So stress is the process, the biological process of physical, neurobiological, neurochemical processes happening in your body in response to that perceived or real threat or danger. But anxiety is now elevation of the same biological processes, and elevation of your fight, flight, freeze response when there is no real danger. And if you think about this, what anxiety is really is the worst case what if scenario. Most of the time anxiety is future based, and we are worrying about things that is not in our control, and we are worrying what if this happens and what if that happens, where in reality that might never even happen. And by putting ourselves in our own cognitive world where we are imagining that danger. And again, the stress response works exactly the same physically, whether you are elevating those biological processes in response to real threat or whether it's only in your head. And that's the difference between us humans and other animals, like lions here, let's say in this image. They will elevate their stress response because they need to, because they need that energy. They need to have specific processes physically to prepare them to fight, to prepare them to take that action that increases your survival and chances of winning. But we humans, we lay awake at night thinking about bills to pay, about worrying about something that might happen, stressing out about something that already happened in the past and we can't change anymore. So that's where anxiety becomes something that is ongoing living process. It's more of a chronic escalation of stress response, and stress has not evolved to be switched on for such a long periods of time in our bodies. So stress can be good, and it evolved there for a reason. And just because we don't understand those reasons very often, or we don't understand how that process works, we very often label stress as bad. But in reality, when it becomes harmful, when it becomes bad, is only when we are abusing that system, where we are abusing those neurobiological processes in our body, and we are fighting our own bodies within by putting it under the pressure of this even minute level of escalation of our sympathetic nervous system. So the difference is really between here and now, and am I really in danger, and am I really fighting a threat, and elevating that stress response for something that has already happened in the past, or something that might never happen in a future, or at any other time in our minds. So just before, so we'll go in to see, okay, so how exactly those systems evolved. So if we want to understand how to control and how to be in control of some of those processes, we need to know the purpose and how do they really work subconsciously beyond the just kind of cognitive rational understanding. So I'll go all the way back to the brain structure. And if we think about this, our body, and again, our nervous system did not evolve with all of their cognition and language and reasonable, rational processes in place. Evolution happened in stages, and the basic primary brainstem and cerebellum here that is illustrated in yellow, those are primal parts of the brain that operate still within us, and yet doesn't involve any reason, any cognition at all. And there's been some very interesting research done where, again, on poor mice, they should deserve more credit for all of the research that's been done on them, where all of the brain parts that are here are shown in green and in red were removed, and only that brain stem and those very, very basic limbic parts were left there. And mice would be still alive. They would still eat, they would still sleep, and they would still reproduce. And those stages of our brain are those processes are still present in us. So we have to understand as well that some of those processes are automatic and they don't really involve our cognitive logic and understanding at all. So it's this reptilian brain that really operates on autopilot, just really to keep us alive and just to regulate all of our bodily functions that we need in order just to simply stay alive. So our body temperature, our body balance, our food, our sleep, some of our hormonal regulation, and so on. Then when we evolve to mammalian stage, when we develop this limbic parts of the brain. Now, if you think about this, now mammals are social beings, right? They live in a group, they nurse their young, they support each other, they depend on one another for their emotional well-being. So again, we also have those parts. We still have those circuits, and we are wired to be those social beings who depend on others for our emotional regulation and for our survival. And only then we develop our human neocortex, so our logic, our reasoning, our rationale. And in a modern environment, we are told that we are these rational, intelligent human beings. You can get what you want, and you are this individual, and everything can be shaped on your terms. But if this was true, then we would not need things like New Year's resolutions, because as you know, we set our goals, New Year's resolutions. A couple of weeks down the line, we've gone back to our old habits, old routines, and all of our cravings and emotional ways of doing and being. Why? Because we make decisions with our logical part of the brain, and in reality, a lot of our existence is being operated through these primal brain structures. And when you think about this, now we think about emotions, and very often we label them as good and bad. This emotion is good, and the other emotion is bad. What emotion really is, and what is the purpose of emotion, is emotion is really energy in motion. Different energies require different action, and therefore emotions have evolved as a motivating drivers for you to take specific decisions, and therefore have a specific behavior that will manifest in you creating specific results. So you'll probably even hear sentences such as, you buy with emotion and then you justify with logic and reason. That you act on the impulse and then you process it and then you regret what you have done. Because again, these emotional, instinctual parts of the brain, they have been there much longer, and therefore they are much more powerful, and therefore they will always be first source of generating our emotions. And only then it takes for our logic and for our reason to catch up with those processes. But in a modern environment, we very often kind of undermine this, and we don't know how to live and how to utilize those subconscious brain processes. We just think that we are these rational, logical human beings, and because we act and think and behave as such, we become in conflict with ourselves, in conflict with some other processes that are good for us as animals, as social beings, as in a way as we have evolved to operate in life through these millions of years of evolution. So now, what does that mean for the rest of our body? Very often we think about brain as if it's something that is in our head. So the first thing when I say brain, you will probably think of this gray, mushy mass in your skull. But in reality, it involves a lot of other processes of your nervous system, and that goes way beyond your spinal cord. It's a complex network that interacts with a lot of other processes of your gut, of your inner organs, of emotional intelligence, and it's a combination of that really drives our behavior. It doesn't just come from our brain. And when we think or feel specific way, you all know that reflects in your body. So you don't have to ask somebody, are you sad right now or are you happy? Because you can see it, right? You can see it from their facial expression, you can see it from their body language, you can see it from their posture. You don't have to ask somebody, are you excited or are you depressed? Because you can really see that in person's body language. But here is a trick. We often don't think that the same process actually happens other way around. Therefore, if you think about what behavior, what expressions, what physical body postures we adapt when we're stressed, when we are anxious, when we are tired, when we're depressed, but we can induce the same feelings by simply adapting those postures, which doesn't help us, again, working with shoulders high, sitting in front of the screens all day. And process works other way around. So by adapting specific postures where that represent and replicate the state of happiness and well-being and calmness, really helps to then down-regulate or up-regulate those neural brain circuits, to regulate our nervous system, and all the way down to this chemical neural balance. So how exactly do we regulate our nervous system? So there are 3 ways to do that. So top-down approach. Now, top-down approach refers to regulating our primer, those deeper anxious brain parts and deeper nervous system through the top parts of our brain. So our rational neocortex would be calming down those older emotional parts of the brain. And this can involve things such as visualizations and what we think, what we say to ourselves. A lot of cognitive reasoning and rationale is there. And also data and information, because knowledge is power. If you know what's going to happen tomorrow, if you are sure about it, if you are in control of it, then there is nothing to worry about it, right? So the way this top-down approach works in a brain would be, it could be illustrated by the example of, let's say you walk out to the garden and you jump for a second because you realize that there is a snake in your garden just by your feet. But then a couple of milliseconds later, you realize that, oh, you know what, silly me, it's not a snake, it's just a water hose. So what is here, that there's emotional brain and there's all this overreaction of stress response as you jump away to protect yourself. But then your brain calms down, your brain catches up to collect all information and all the visuals from environment, and then it translates that information to say, it's okay, you anxious monkey, you don't have to jump around, it's only a hose. So that's the process that happens through that top-down approach. Now, the other approach is opposite, which is bottom-up approach. And that is what I've referred to before, where we can influence and calm down our brain and our nervous system through our body. So now, by adapting specific posture, by tensing specific muscles in the face. For example, you know, what happens to your body when you smile? What happens to your brain when you smile? What happens when you are in specific physical position, where you place yourself in specific place, and how exactly we can then and that automatically then translates to calming down our brain, or matching our physical state with that emotional state. Now, that transfer of information from the body to the brain happens through vagus nerve. Vagus nerve is that link between, let's say, your nervous system of your gut and your brain. And around 85% of the fibers, direction of those nervous fibers actually run from the gut to the brain, and only the other 15 or so running from the brain to the gut. So you can imagine here, that just shows that we have a very, very big power to influence our brain and our cognition, our thinking, our emotions through our body. But nobody ever teaches that. those are not things that we learn at school, right? We're only being told to cheer up and be positive and boys don't cry and off you go. But in reality, there's a lot of different things that we can do to utilize our body to regulate our emotional states. And then the final way of doing this is outside in. So now this refers to regulating our mind, brain, and body through the external outside environment. So now think about, how do you feel when you are in a specific place? How do you feel when you're looking at the sunset? How listening to different music inspires different feelings within you? And maybe you're listening to the song and it makes you cry. You're listening to another song, it will make you happy. What happens when you smell different things? How smells can affect your body. How your physical environment and things that are around you are affecting your body. And this also includes foods we eat, because this is really just one of the ways of the external world getting inside us, right? And our diet therefore has tremendous effect on our emotions as well. So what happens exactly to those connections when we are stressed and when we are, let's say, having anxiety attack? So before I give you a little bit more information about stress and that stress response and anxiety, it's important to understand how exactly it manifests in our body, and that involves our nervous system. So our autonomous nervous system is divided into sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. So the way you could see, so sympathetic is the one that drives stress response, and parasympathetic system is the one that calms it down and relaxes you. And very often those systems are being referred to as sympathetic system is stress response, as that is your fight, flight, and freeze system, and parasympathetic system is referred to as your rest, digest, reproduce system. However, it's a great oversimplification, because those two systems, they are not, one is good and another one is bad. They are both interlinked and they are both needed very much to generate specific actions, behaviors, and what it means to be alive. So sympathetic nervous system could really be compared as that accelerator pedal for your car, right? So something that makes you go, that makes you to take action, something that gives you energy. And that applies to all the minute levels of your body, of your the way how our internal organs work as well. And then parasympathetic system are your brakes. So something that calms you down, makes you stop, makes you pause. But as you know, if you want to get somewhere in life, you're not going to get there only with brakes in place and not having an accelerator. So in exactly the same way, our body needs sympathetic nervous system to drive our energy, to drive our intentions. And it's a very, very important message that I want you to take away from this, because a lot of people think that, well, stress is bad and I don't want it, and sympathetic system is the bad one that causes the stress. Well, not really. It's needed there. It just, the secret in our health and well-being is not in just having one or the other, white and black, one without the other, is in equilibrium, in balance between the two, and knowing when we activate which one, how much we activate which one, and when it's the time to switch it off and how we can do that. So a lot of exercises and things that we're going to be looking into how exactly we can do that will involve our ability to regulate those systems. So people who are naturally anxious, people who are more depressed, they have tendency to simply have trained specific aspects of our nervous system that over the time, it just becomes our natural habitual way of responding it all the time. Because guess what? The brain circuits and our nervous pathways and neuronal connections, those could be compared to something like a road network and a way of communicating between different parts of the brain and body and all of the nervous system. And if you think that those different pathways and different brain connections are being used all the time, then what happens? They become much stronger and they become into those super highways, motorways that are very, very easy to use, and they're just fast, quick, automatic, just happens without our attention. And again, if there are some of these neurological behaviors and links that we are not using, then they simply die out like any other road would be disappearing if it's not used, and the grass would grow over and there is no road there anymore. But that doesn't mean that we cannot change it. It's believed very wrongly for many years that when you are born, you have all of these connections in your brain and it's there, and then through the age, it just slowly dies out. But it's not true. Our brain is plastic, which means it has a facility to self-adjust and create the new links and even create new neurons and rebuild and restructure our system as needed in face of challenges, in face of changes of environment and different other exercises and therapeutic processes that can affect this. So what exactly happens when our body experiences that stress response? So I know that you cannot really read here any images here, so don't even try to do that. It's very blurry. I will send you the slides after, and I can send you some more information where you can read this. So I'd like you just to imagine that you go back to that time where all the way back to that previous image where you saw fighting lions. So I want you to imagine yourself as that caveman living those millions of years ago, where you are fighting for your survival, or again, you are, maybe just walking to fetch some water, and then suddenly lion jumps out on you. So here, now that's what stress response evolved to do, to save you from that situation. So what exactly happens? What physically happens in your body to maximize your chances of success and your chances of survival? So first of all, is that your physical body is adjusted to protect yourself, and especially to protect all these vulnerable parts of your body that could be attacked first. So we protect our neck, we will protect our gut, and we'll protect our genitals, right? Because those are our vulnerable areas that are, if it gets hurt, our survival is compromised. So that's the very, very first thing that happens to us when we experience stress. We crouch, we slouch, we put our shoulders up, our knees pull close to our body. So we are really in that cocooned position. That's the intuitive thing that we want to do to physically protect ourselves. Now, what else happens? Now, what if you need to fight that lion? What if you really need to fight for your life? So now your body adjusts itself to prepare you for that fight. So to do that, it shifts your cardiovascular system in a way that now it will deliver maximum oxygen and maximum blood flow into your muscles. So what happens here, that the blood flow is changed and reversed the direction to what it would normally be. Now it goes away from your gut and away from your internal organs into the muscles. And that's for two reasons. So first is to give you the maximum energy and your muscles to fight, but also to stop your digestion and to stop all of these internal processes that are happening internally that waste your energy, and again to protect you from infection and bleeding if let's say your guts are damaged. That's the reason why you will feel like you need to go to the toilet when you're stressed and anxious, because your body is trying to eliminate itself of any waste products, so that if you do get hurt, you don't actually infect your body with those waste products. So, so those muscles create that armor, give us that energy to fight, and I think you can often feel if you're anxious and stressed, you feel tense. You'll feel your muscles becoming tense. You probably clench your fists, and your muscles are really in a different state. And the blood flow also goes from the skin into the muscles, and this is really to protect your body from bleeding. So your skin is now becoming more white. You will probably be sweating in response to that. And again, here, if the lion gives you a few scratches, this will protect your body from bleeding to that point of view. Also, there are a lot of chemicals that are being released in your body, as you can imagine, to facilitate all of this process from happening. So a lot of neurochemicals that happen to facilitate direction of the blood flow in a different place. There is a breathing that is adjusted. We breathe completely differently when we are in that state. And there's also all these cytokines as well that are excreted into our bloodstream, because they are anti-inflammatories in case of any damage to our body physically. And they're supposed to be just for a short period of time. They're just there in case of that damage happening. And they're not supposed to be there over a long period of time. But you can imagine that now what happens, we find ourselves in a modern environment. We are stressing about whatever, mortgage, bills, our job. Our body still goes through the same processes. It still affects our digestion, because we are not giving our best chances for our body to digest. It affects our cardiovascular system, because it's pumping blood into a different ways in different places to what it's supposed to be when we are resting and repairing. With the brain as well, here is a very interesting thing, that brain is one of the most energy consuming organs in our body. So brain is around 2% of our body weight, but it consumes around 20% of energy. And most of those processes are being consumed by these logical, rational parts of the brain. So what happens here, that if we have to fight, if we are under threat, our logical, rational part of the brain simply switches off, because we cannot afford that time to deliberate. Shall I run or shall I fight? That's where that reptilian brain takes over and makes you act. And that's again the reason why sometimes when you are under that stress and pressure, you do things and you say stuff that you will regret later, because it's not that action did not involve your human parts of the brain. You did that for bare self-protection in face of that threatening attack or situation. And when you think about this, if we are always under threat, if you're always in that stress mode, when we are stressed, when you are being, let's say, attacked by that lion, your body also switches off all the long-term processes. So your healing, your digestion and being able to take energy out of food, your reproduction systems, your immunity, again, for the long term, it's completely stopped, because you know what? You might not need it tomorrow. You might not survive this moment. So why don't we take all the energy from the body and put it into the systems that can give you the maximum chances of survival here and now. And only when we know that it's safe, your body can then restore and go back to repairing your immune system, to rebuilding your reproductive systems, to rebuilding your nutrients and repairing your body tissues and so on. But again, as we said before, that in this modern environment, we are creating a lot of our anxieties by thinking processes, and sometimes something stressful happens and we continue to be stressed for it for a long, long time after that threat has passed. While animals don't do that. And there is a book that I definitely recommend about all these processes and how it happens in your body, and it's called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And it really looks at our cognitive responses and how we create that stress and anxiety in our body physically, and what prevents us from switching it off. And again, that's our biggest evolutionary blessing, our neocortex, that now by thinking about it, we can either regulate this stress response, or we can also switch it on when we think about perceived dangers and threats. So it might look quite scary, right? When you think like so much is happening in your body, and a lot can make sense in terms of now being able to pick some of these sensations and your body posture and effect on your, let's say, on your cardiovascular system, and how it affects your diet and your eating and so on. But is stress really bad? Well, not at all, because again, it's only harmful if it's switched on for prolonged periods of time at the times when we don't need that. So what can we do about this? What can we do to put in place to prevent this from happening? So here are some practical things you can put in place to help you to regulate this sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system response. So first of all, so what's the difference between this good and bad stress? So first of all is how often and for how long we switch on that stress response. So if we are stressed for everything, for things that are out of control, and we're getting stressed all the time, then of course this builds up in our body. So what's important to realize here is to learn to understand our triggers. So here I'd like to invite you to ask yourself, so what stresses me? When do I get anxious? What really gets me into those uncontrollable emotional states? And when you look at all of the triggers that get you into that state, and the next question that I'd like to invite you to ask is, okay, so when I get stressed about those things, how many of those is in my control, and what are the things that are out of my control? Because this stress response system has evolved for us to take action. So if we are stressing about things that are out of our control, that means there is nothing we can do. So we are switching on that accelerator, but there is no road, there is nowhere for us to go. So we keep hitting the wall and damaging ourselves. So it's very important to really assess, okay, is this in my control and not? And if it's not, then we need to find a way to switch off that stress response. So how often and for how long you switch on that stress response when you deal with a threat, when they're coping with some difficult situation and you elevate that stress response. Are you just stressed during that time when you are doing it, or you continue to be stressed and anxious for few days or months or years after, as it often happens with trauma and PTSD and so on. So second thing is, when we do get stressed, to what level do we activate that sympathetic nervous system? Because now here is the thing. If you are, again, put yourself back into the time when you are being attacked by the lion. How differently do you think your body will respond if you think, oh my God, I'm just about to die here, and your body really switches off your rational parts of the brain. It really starts to shut down for your self-protection. It switches off all of these very needed biological processes in your body just to maximize your survival at that moment. Or now if you think, you know what? I'm in a situation here where I can win against this lion. I can fight it, I can kill it, I'm in control. And you know that, if you feel that you can do this. Now what happens? Your body doesn't go that far to switch on that sympathetic nervous system until, so that all of these processes of shutting down your body begins. Now, your body acts very differently. You actually have the blood flow still in your muscles, and there is still that blood flow, but also you actually have that blood flow flowing to your prefrontal cortex. So it gives you that maximum advantage to think, to react to when you are in that state where you can. In that maximum performance winning state, like athletes when they compete, when they know that they are winning, it's your body is now becomes this lean machine for winning. And biological processes in your body are very, very different to the ones where your body start to shut down because you think, I'm here just about to survive. So the second aspect here is knowing how we can regulate that level and how we don't go over that bridge where it becomes too damaging. And the third aspect is, okay, now the threat has passed, the stressful event is bygones, the lion is killed, now you're going home. How well are you able to recover, and for how long you still keep your blood pumping and your stress levels high, how well you're able to actually switch it off, put it away, and relax and give your body those best chances to recover, to rebuild, to heal, to recuperate. And that's what we do in a normal environment. We do all the opposite things, right? We're stressed about things that we cannot do anything about. We're stressed about things that are not threatening or dangerous as well. And we elevate that stress response all the time just by thinking and creating those patterns where we generate this elevated level of stress all the time. Then when we are under really difficult situations where maybe we only need that elevated stress response that is equal to excitement, that would give us that better increase in that better level of performance. Now we're going too far, and now our body starts to shut down. And again, we continue to live that stress in our heads, even though in reality it has passed. So we are not giving our body chance to recover, to recuperate, and to heal. So what to do about it? How exactly put that into practice? Because I think I've given you a lot of knowledge in terms of theory, and sorry if it was quite heavy in terms of science and a lot of facts and data about what is really happening in your body. But how do you control that now? How can you then utilize processes that we have discussed to make a difference. So there are two different ways of breathing. Now, breathing is this amazing thing that links our physical body and all of the processes that happen automatically with our cognitive conscious influence. And when we are stressed, when we are under experiencing some panic and anxiety attacks, we actually breathe very shallow. We breathe from shoulders. Our shoulders are really high. And this is so-called apical breathing, where our oxygen doesn't actually even access these lower parts of our abdomen, because that would again stimulate blood flow into our internal organs and so on. So to prevent it from happening, we actually only breathing from the top part of our lungs. So people who are chronically stressed, who are suffering a lot from anxiety, you'll be able to see that their breathing is actually always shallow, and their shoulders are very tense and sometimes quite raised, and they will be having all sorts of neck and upper back pains because of this, because they always have that bit of elevation of stress in their shoulders. And then when we are in that parasympathetic nervous system, when we allow our body to relax, to repair, to digest, that's where we're really breathing very deep from our lungs, and we have this abdominal breathing. I'm just going to stop the recording here for a moment, and I'll invite you to actually test some of those systems and how exactly we can put that into practice. So if you sit yourself nice, straight and comfortable with feet on the floor, with your hands nice on your lap. Now we will try some of this apical breathing. Okay, so what I'd like you to do now, on every inhale, I'd like to invite you to just raise your shoulders a tiny bit. And when you exhale, you keep your shoulders where they are. So on your every inhale, you just lift your shoulders a tiny bit and you keep them there when you exhale. So you inhale and you just lift your shoulders slightly and you just keep breathing this way and observe what happens in your body. How does it make you feel? It's not very pleasant, isn't it, right? So don't have to hold on to that, shake it off. You can, just by doing this, you can feel that tension and anxiety building up in your body. So this is that process where we refer to bottom-up approach. By taking specific posture, by adapting our physical body in specific way, we can elicit specific response on our emotions and on our internal emotional being. So now let's look at how differently it would look like if we are now in that parasympathetic, relaxed breathing. So now what I'd like to invite you to do is, when you breathe in, instead of before we were breathing in our shoulders, now you breathe in into your stomach. You can hold your hand on your belly if you like. So you breathe into your stomach. And now when you exhale, you relax your shoulders. So you breathe into your stomach. And when you exhale, you relax your shoulders and neck and head. You breathe into your belly. And when you exhale, you relax your shoulders. And just now see now what difference does that make? And how differently does this make you feel? How differently you think, you feel when you are in that state? And when you think about this, we just did one smallest little thing. We shifted our breathing to a different place. So hopefully this demonstrates to you what happens to our breathing and what happens to our physical body when we are in sympathetic anxious nervous system and when we are in our parasympathetic rest system. Now, because those systems are both there and they're both active all the time at the same time, they are just elevated at a different level. Now, your inhalation, your every inhale is actually driven by sympathetic nervous system. So this is your accelerator, right? That accelerator is also powering your inhale. And your parasympathetic nervous system is controlling your exhale. So when those systems are out of balance, that's where, when we're, let's say, if you see somebody having panic attack, when you're having asthma attack, it's overreaction of your sympathetic nervous system. You will see people breathing in, and you can't exhale. So when somebody's having panic attack, they can't exhale. They're just inhaling. There is no way for them to exhale because the sympathetic system is overactive and parasympathetic system doesn't allow them to regulate it. So here is a very simple way to switch that off immediately in few breaths. Okay, so if we know that sympathetic nervous system is your stress response and your parasympathetic nervous system is your relaxation, normally our average breathing is around the length of count to 4. So normally when we are breathing, the average is we inhale for 4, we exhale for 4. That's more or less normal balance. The more stressed we get, the more powerful, the more stronger is our inhale and the shorter is our exhale. So if we know that, and if we know that we can manipulate our body and our breathing to down-regulate and up-regulate our brain through our body, then we know that we need to be lengthening our exhale. So one way of switching off your panic attack and stress is the so-called 4 to 8 breathing. And that means that you breathe in for 4, and then you breathe out for 5. Then you again breathe in for 4, so you're maintaining that stable level. Then you breathe out, so you breathe in for 4, breathe out for 4. Breathe in for 4, breathe out for 5. Breathe in for 4, breathe out for 6. In for 4, out for 7. In for 4, out for 8. So now your exhale is exactly twice as long as your inhale. And that allows you to bring that balance back and to increase your sympathetic nervous system and balance out and stabilize your sympathetic nervous system. So that's where you see somebody anxious and having a panic attack. You could actually count with them and guide them through and get them out of their panic state of the attack, and believe it or not, even asthma attack, by applying this breathing technique, because it balances out your overactivated stress response with a calm parasympathetic nervous system. There are some other things that we can do in terms of breathing. So another great technique for breathing is the so-called box breathing technique. And it's used very often in military. So if you imagine box breathing, if you imagine a square, you could draw a square for yourself on a page. I see some of you are taking notes, so you could draw a square on a page. So what this now means that the left side of the square is your inhale. So you could draw an arrow that goes up, and that's your inhale. The top line of the square is now you holding your breath in. Now the right side of the box is your exhale, and the arrow goes down, and then the bottom bit of the square is you holding your exhale. So you holding breath out. Now, this way as well, when you look at this in a lot of ancient traditions, tribal intelligence, a lot of things like meditation and yoga and Ayurveda, we always refer to 4 elements, right? You have your air, you have your water, you have your earth, and you have your fire. Now, we think about those as more kind of like mythical things, but in reality, it's different types of energies that actually play out in our bodies as well. And imbalances between those energies can then also affect our emotional well-being. So each of those elements can be now assigned to different part of the box. So your inhale is water, and it has that cooling effect on your body. When you're holding the breath in, that's your air, and it helps you to balance out the other two elements. When you're exhaling out, that's your fire. And when you think about this, people who are doing martial arts and karate, when do they have the most energy is when they powerfully exhale. So the fire is in a way there, which might seem a bit contradictory when you think, so how is exhale calming? But actually it is a fire. But you know that it's the fire that keeps your body, you need that energy to produce the healing, to produce the that inner fire, to generate all of these processes of being alive, of breathing, of so on. And then your exhale, when you're holding out, that's your earth. So when you think about different emotional states, if you are even physically feeling too hot, you could calm down by very slowly inhaling through your mouth as if it was a, let's say, a straw. So even if you're breathing in this way, it actually calms down even the temperature of your body. Again, if you are exhaling and you have your karate movements and out, it will heat up your body from that point of view in terms of that very quick exhale. Now, if you sometimes feel dizzy, you feel like your head is all up in the air, and we have those wonderful sayings of, you know, my head is in the air, I feel dizzy, and so on. When you have too much of that air, now you need to feel more grounded. So when you feel like your head is up in the clouds, by simply holding your exhale, now you can feel yourself more grounded. And when you have too much grounding, when you feel like you are too attached to this material world, it's often a sign of that air and of that freedom and that head space missing. And therefore, you want to encourage more of holding in breath that allows you to balance those different energies. So here you can see how even different breathing techniques can be utilized to bring different energy into the body and to calm down some of those different processes that are happening in our minds, brains and bodies. So that's breathing techniques, and they're definitely very, very powerful. But there are some other things as well that can be used to regulate our anxiety and regulate our stress response. So we've looked already at the breathing. We looked at the last bit, and we had some of those exercises of how we can switch it off automatically and how we can utilize our breathing to bring different emotional energies and states into our body. Now we can also look at mindset. So mindset is more of that top-down approach where our knowledge, our awareness, the way we think, and our visualizations have really great power and influence on our body and physical effects. So it's definitely things we say to ourselves, our self-criticism and where we focus our mind and attention to definitely influences shift of our energy. And being able to use that mindset and again, knowledge and awareness of all these things that we've learned today now in terms of what stress is and how it works in our body, by knowing it, we become aware of maybe some of those physical processes happening in our bodies when we become stressed. So therefore, we can talk ourselves out of it. We can calm ourselves down with logic, rationale, and reason. Utilizing your posture. So again, if we know that when we are stressed and anxious, we are taking this body posture and approach when we are slouch, crouch, and protect ourselves, what we want to do and what we want to practice more and more often is utilizing physical postures, and again, exercise and state of our physical balance in a way that is as far from that state as possible. So there is a state that is called a winning pose. It's a position that if you watch somebody running a marathon, as soon as the winning person, if they win, what do they do the first time? What they do as soon as they cross that finish line? They will reach their hands, they will lift their chin, they'll open their chest, they'll open their neck. There's this very wide position. Their feet are probably still running when they do that. And guess what? Those people who do yoga will recognize that this will probably be very similar to your warrior postures, that they're very wide, they're very open, you have your hands up for that warrior type 1 posture. So those are really great postures to balance out all of the neurochemical balance in your in your nervous system, in your body physically, and really get you that into that energy state when you have the right energy, when you have that right frame of mindset and health for yourself. So for here, you can look up Power Posing by Amy Cuddy. So Amy Cuddy has invented this power posing word, and she actually really done a lot of research between how your body, your neurochemical balance interacts with your physical state, and how this process works other way around. And she encourages all this power posing and taking the moment of adapting this physical posture to down-regulate your stress response, let's say before you go to a stressful meeting or before you know that you need to approach a stressful situation. So there's a lot of those processes that we can put in place. And then again, as we mentioned before, we're also looking at our environment. We're looking at how we can utilize our environment to create familiarity, to create safety, to create connections, to utilize things such as specific music and nature, and what effects that has on our recovery mainly, and being able to switch off from that stressful environment and go back to that state of calm, relaxation, and healing. So those are some processes here that you could use for yourself, and look at your past triggers, identify what triggers you, understand what of those are in your control and what is not. And if you visit that stressful event and explore all of those sensations and tensions and emotions and thoughts that come your way, it becomes very creative, very useful way of learning about stress. Because you know what, when you are in real stress, when you are in that actual fight flight response, that's not the time to take a moment and pause and think, okay, you know, my hands are feeling tense and my palms are sweaty and I feel like punching somebody in the face. However, you can do that processing after. You can revisit some of those stressful states, revisit them, and unpack the information there. So what does it feel like? How does my stress feel like? Where exactly I feel it the most? And when you have that awareness, now you can utilize that as an active reminder next time to create these so-called what if and if then scenarios. So if you notice that your breathing is shifting, and that's the first thing that you will notice, that maybe your breathing is shifting to your shoulders, Or maybe the first thing you notice is your palms getting sweaty. Maybe the first thing you notice is tension in your muscles or heaviness in your legs, as if you want to run away. So whatever those things you notice, now you can say, okay, so if I feel that tension bubbling up, if I feel that tension in my shoulders, I feel those sweaty palms, then I will do, let's say, 4 to 8 breathing. Then I will go for a walk so I can escape that situation. Then I can do something else. And it's very important that it's action based. You actually do something, because the stress response has been built for you to take action. And if you don't take any action, it takes action inside. It takes action to create some physical health effects and influence you from that point of view. So it has to, you have to take action from that point of view. However, by creating a little gap between responding to a trigger immediately and taking some different action, you reroute and you go for a walk, you do your 4 to 8 breathing. Now what that allows you is, again, to bring the balance between those two nervous systems. And from there, now you can take better decisions. From there, now you can respond in much better way from that point of view. So there we are. So I'd like to know now, how can you use this information? What can you do differently? What are your biggest takeaways? And is there anything that you'd like to learn next?